evening. The stabbing death of a Queensland grandmother. Why is a court protecting her alleged teenage killers? I'm no thug. Peter Dutton today fires back after Malcolm Turnbull's vicious personal insult. The farmers fighting to save their future. The new challenge to net zero. Could South Australia be on its way to banning gender conversion in children? And Prince Harry rushing home as King Charles begins his fight against cancer. But first tonight, fresh revelations about the failings of the police investigation into the Opera House protest. Tonight on my show, one witness, who is an Anglican church reverend, will reveal that he told police that he heard "kill the Jews," and a protester threatened to slit his throat, but police took no action, telling him there was no evidence of a crime and they wouldn't take it further. New South Wales Police ignored the testimony from numerous witnesses who heard the "Gas the Jews" chant, while they failed to even interview at least one other witness, despite being provided with their details. It seems that police may have effectively given up the investigation halfway through. I can also reveal that police failed to start tracking down the "Gas the Jews" footage from the group that first made it public until just before Christmas, some 2.5 months after the protest. And another guest who'll join me tonight reveals that he had to chase police up to actually hand them the footage in late December. Now, ignoring the clear evidence from multiple different witnesses who heard the "Gas the Jews" chant, New South Wales Police relied on the sole opinion of a Canberra-based university professor, Michael Wagner, who wasn't there on the night in question. It was just his opinion. Police admitted to me that police obtained statements from several individuals who attended the protest indicating they heard the phrase "Gas the Jews." However, these statements have not attributed the phrase to any specific individual. So police there seemingly blaming the victims who couldn't identify the Palestinian protesters. Now, one witness who doesn't want to be named publicly had a stat deck done and it was sent to police. They called him on February the 2nd, but then never followed up. And yet police called this a task force. Their incompetence is breathtaking. This was a cover-up exercise designed to justify the police and the police minister's gross failings and misjudgment on the night in question. The Opera House protests were shameful for Australia and certainly for the New South Wales Police Minister and the force under her command. The Police Minister, Yasmin Catley, told Jews to stay home instead of ensuring that the city was safe for all Australian citizens. She referred to Jews as "you people" when speaking to a community leader, David Ossip, and under her watch, police escorted the violent protesters from Town Hall to the Opera House, where this vile aggression unfolded. And let's not forget that the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, has already apologised because his police minister had told Jews to stay at home. Now, police could have stopped the protest, just like they stopped anti-COVID lockdown protests. Police didn't have a problem with fining breastfeeding mothers for daring to sit down on a park bench with their babies during COVID, and yet they didn't lift a finger on the night of this shameful rally. Police didn't say "Gas the Jews," that the "Gas the Jews" chant hadn't happened. They just said at their press conference on Friday that they couldn't prove it to the standard required for criminal prosecution, and they couldn't identify any individuals who'd allegedly said it. Now, that is very different to saying that the "Gas the Jews" chant didn't happen. Yet bizarrely, in the wake of this press conference, some are claiming a journalism win. It's sick and twisted. One Labor politician celebrated the finding. That's MLC, he's a Labor politician, Stephen Lawrence. He said in a Facebook post that disinformation is a growing problem. He says, "Well done to New South Wales Police, who've meticulously handled and investigated this Opera House protest matter." He says the growing dangers of real-time disinformation influencing social and political developments is real And this is a powerful example and a cautionary tale. And sacked ABC fill-in host Antoinette Lattouf wrote on Twitter that Cameron Wilson and I investigated the authenticity of the Australian Jewish Association edited and distributed video, and that's false. They didn't edit it. She says, then I was savagely targeted for doing accurate journalism. I look forward to receiving apologies from the Australian Sky News, the Australian Jewish Association, the Executive Council for Australian Jewry, and at least a couple of WhatsApp groups. Demanding an apology from Jewish groups who were the victims of extreme racism at this protest. Those claiming lack of proof over the Gas the Jews chant don't have empathy and don't share the pain of the Jewish community. Equally offensive chants of F the Jews and Where's the Jews and Kill the Jews were also said. Let's be clear, this isn't a journalism win that police couldn't prove the Gas the Jews chant to the standard of criminal prosecution. The police acknowledged that eyewitnesses heard the Gas the Jews chant. They just didn't have enough evidence to prosecute or charge anyone or identify anyone from that protest. And police confirmed the videos had not been doctored, as Crikey had been implying. Now, when Lattouf calls her campaign accurate journalism, she's celebrating that one anti-Semitic chant was said over another. What a disgrace. That's not journalism, that's activism and propaganda. This protest came just 48 hours after the worst loss of life for Jews since the Holocaust, and it took place while fighting was still going on against Hamas in some kibbutzes. It's unfathomable that pro-Palestinian activists, as Tim Blair put it today, were running delirious victory laps all weekend on social media. Tim Blair wrote in his Telegraph column, well, hooray for that. The Jew-hating mob clearly chanted F the Jews, as police confirm, but they didn't say Gas the Jews. He points out that where are the Jews was repeatedly asked by Nazi SS officers as they searched Warsaw's ghetto during World War II, and discovery, as you know, meant death. And the same chant heard just recently in Russia when an angry mob stormed an airport tarmac looking for Jews on a flight from Israel. Now, just to put this all in context for a second, imagine media organisations running a campaign that only a chant of F the Muslims was said by an angry mob burning flags, not Gas the Muslims. It would never happen because both are equally upsetting, racist and offensive. There's no distinction between the levels of offence and intimidation that it caused. The media organisations who ran this campaign, namely the online website Crikey, should be condemned in the strongest terms for racism. It's shocking that there are claims that Jews who heard with their own ears the chant Gas the Jews should be investigated. Antoinette Lattouf wrote in Crikey just yesterday that the barrister for the pro-Palestinian protest organisers and former police officer Mahmoud Hawila called on New South Wales Police to investigate the videos, noting that it was an offence to give false or misleading information in the investigation of a complaint. And he's quoted in her article saying, I imagine police, protesters and other affected communities will be looking very closely at this to detect whether any laws were breached and carefully considering their options. Just let that digest. So Lattouf is now reporting that the Jews should be investigated for the anti-Semitic chants against them that they heard just 48 hours after the worst massacre in a single day since the Holocaust. Is this garbage for real? We all know how disgusting that protest was, how un-Australian, how racist. We all know the police failed our entire Australian community, escorting the vile protesters and allowing the spectacle to unfold and the images to be broadcast globally, tainting our Australian icon, the Opera House. There's no question the majority of Australians hate the scenes that took place, and they want police to act with the laws that are there to protect Australians. This has all been an upsetting episode. It's gaslighting the Jewish community. In other words, this has been an orchestrated attempt by media and pro-Palestinian activists to invalidate the experience of Jews and Israel supporters who were the victims of severe racism on our streets. Now, as I said, I'm going to have an Anglican Church reverend on my show later who was there that night, and he's going to talk about how police dismissed his clear evidence. So stay tuned for that a bit later in the show. Now, the Coalition is agreeing to back the Stage 3 tax cut changes, despite the Prime Minister being dishonest over the election promise-breaking reforms.
Prime Minister's made this change for his own political survival. We're supporting this change, not to support the Prime Minister's lie, but to support those families who need help now.
All right, to discuss this, joining me, Sky News host Steve Price and former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop. Great to see you both. Look, Steve, this is heating up between Albanese and Peter Dutton, the opposition leader effectively calling the Prime Minister a liar from the lodge today. How personal is this fight going to get?
I think it'll get very personal, and I'll be intrigued to see what Bronwyn makes of that liar in the lodge and whether it sticks. I mean, I don't think the Coalition had any option here. They were going to be wedged if they said that they wouldn't support the changed legislation on Stage 3. I mean, you can't really go out there toward an election saying, well, I'm against tax cuts for people. I mean, that was never going to happen. I thought Peter Dutton performed pretty well today. I thought what he did in explaining this to the Australian public was the right thing to do. But what the Coalition now need to do, in my mind, is they need to, one, prosecute the fact that the Prime Minister and his Treasurer lied hundreds of times in the lead up to the election. That's point number one. And the second point, they've got to come up with their own fresh tax package that they take to the people when it comes to the election, probably going to be held in the first part of 2025.
Bronwyn, I thought the news poll results yesterday were very interesting for the Prime Minister because they're around the same position on a two-party preferred basis as they were before Christmas. So this indicates that the broken promise hasn't severely damaged Albanese, but then on the other hand, he's just spent billions of dollars giving Australians, millions of Australians, an extra $900 a year, and they haven't really thanked him for that massive sweetener.
No, they haven't, and they won't. In my view, they'll take the money and still call him a liar. What was done today is, I mean, the Coalition is the party of tax cuts. It's glued to their DNA. So they're never going to vote against giving a tax cut to people. But the real broken promise was the broken promise of tax reform. We're always hearing about we need fundamental tax reform. Getting rid of the 37 cents in the dollar marginal rate was true reform. And that is the promise that has been broken. And that is what has to be prosecuted strongly. And it'll take time. And I believe that Peter Dutton will keep that up. He'll keep prosecuting that point. And just as it took a long time for the Julia Gillard mistruth, lie, whatever, to get up, and I was part of prosecuting that case, this one has got a long way to run. And if he thinks, anybody thinks that Albanese is going to wait till next May, of 2025, to have an election.
You still think it's going to be this year?
I still do. He's got tax cuts on the 1st of July. You've got the governor of the Reserve Bank saying, "Oh well, we might have an interest reduction. That'll be playing into it." He's not going to waste that emphasis because what happens is, by the time you get to May of 2025, they say, "What have you done for me lately?" So
I guess it'll depend how they go in the Dunkley by-election, but
well, no. The big factor in the Dunkley by-election, to my thinking, is that unfortunately the member who passed away,
Peter Murphy,
people had a great deal of time for her, a great deal of respect for her, and that will play into that by-election. this question of I'll take the money but you still lied will be there. And I would expect a swing to occur. Whether or not the seat changes hands, I think, is down to the factor that she was a really good person who was in connection with her electorate.
Yeah. All right, another big story today. We saw leading politicians Pauline Hanson, Jacinta Price, Bob Katter, Barnaby Joyce joined angry farmers in an anti-renewables rally outside Parliament House today.
You are the custodians of our land. Have they listened to you as to how renewable energy, wind turbines, solar farms are going to impact your lives, your land, our land, and furthermore, all Australians?
No, they haven't.
And to see so many people in this country that are so fed up with our politicians because they've lost connection with the people. With grassroots, they don't understand.
They've told you that 9,000 megawatts is coming off a 32,000 megawatt grid. Now, if you can add up, that means the lights go out in 5 years' time.
The power price has gone through the roof. The reliability has gone through the floor, and your money is going overseas. And that's supposed to be a power plan.
Steve, part of the frustration of some of the people who were gathered there related to wind farms. Labor's putting a lot of major wind farm projects in people's backyards. This is an issue that the residents of those areas are so angry about that it could very well change seats.
Yeah, Sharri, look, I've been saying for weeks now that I think this is going to be a huge issue this year. You talk about the wind towers, the turbines. It's also acres and acres and acres of solar panels that I saw on a recent road trip from Melbourne to Sydney and back. And it's also transmission lines. I spoke to the boss of the Australian Farmers Federation last week on Sky, and he said that the big thing for him is these transmission lines, because with the transmission lines, you've got no option as to whether you have to host them on your property or not. You can be paid to have a wind turbine or some solar panels, but the legislation allows these transmission lines to go straight through your property. I mean, I just can't believe that the Greens in particular are just sitting there going, oh, well, we've got to have so much renewable energy, we're just going to let Australia be carpet bombed with all these new green energy projects. They look awful, they look terrible, they're going to cost a fortune. We're never going to get enough of this stuff done in time to make a real difference. And I think it's going to be a massive political issue as we go into 2024.
Yeah, enormous. And yet the Teals were laughing at the politicians who actually joined that protest today. Now, Bronwyn, we saw some strong words from former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull about Peter Dutton, even about Matthias Cormann. He was criticising his weight gain on the ABC last night. I didn't watch the program. I've seen the clips. Peter Dutton returned fire today. Have a look at what he had to say.
If I said the name Peter Dutton, what one word springs into your mind?
Thug.
Have you found me to be a thug? I think some of the narrative is sort of retrofitting a particular purpose, and I think I've proven in the past that I'm able to deal with one liar at a time.
Bronwyn, the animosity is unsurprising. Peter Dutton effectively brought down Malcolm Turnbull's prime ministership, even though it was Turnbull himself who called that empty chair leadership spill on the Tuesday in August 2018.
It was Turnbull who brought down Tony Abbott.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is I didn't watch it. I don't watch the ABC. But what it does prove is how right Richardson was not to have Turnbull in the Labor Party. I mean, this whole program has been put forward to give Labor grabs that they can use against Peter Dutton in the future. And quite frankly, I'm surprised at former coalition colleagues who went on it. Why would you go on it? The ABC is not going to do them any favours. They're not going to come out in any bright, shining light. What's the point? So I just find whatever the ABC does in this space is always designed to assist the liar in the lodge.
Well, there you go, that line, that phrase that Peter Dutton used today.
And by the way, I thought Steve was absolutely spot on about the question of these farmers.
Yes.
And it is going to be a big issue.
Yep.
And I just remember how big all those rallies were against the carbon tax, and this has got the potential to do the same thing.
To be the same. Now, look, another issue in your neck of the woods, Steve, in Melbourne, we've seen this report today in the Herald Sun that people are just fed up with their local councils, that they're putting ideology over collecting the garbage, that they're more interested in Australia Day and waving the Palestinian flag than actually doing what people pay rate money for. You know, what's your experience with the councils in your area?
The Green Left councils in Melbourne are just completely out of control. I'll give you one example. Yarra Council, which had not a statue, but a monument to Captain Cook. This wasn't the one that was cut off at the knees prior to Australia Day. That was in St Kilda. This is in the city of Yarra. This is the same mob that on Australia Day don't fly the Australian flag. They fly the Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag at half-mast and all this sort of stuff. They've now put that Cook monument into a cupboard. You'll never see it again. And so the public are fed up with this. I mean, this is the same council who now only collects your garbage once every fortnight. So they can't even get your rubbish, but they want to get involved in, you know, protecting Palestine, getting involved in all sorts of political issues that got nothing to do with them. And I thought there was a very interesting comment today from the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, who said, if you want to get involved in foreign affairs, get elected to the federal parliament and become the foreign minister like Penny Wong. You're a council. Remember, you're a councillor. You've got to fix potholes, fix the rubbish and get on with the job that the ratepayers are paying you to do. I thought Minns was outstanding on that today.
You know what? He is the model of a Labor politician that is actually makes sense because he's in touch with Middle Australia. He's not, doesn't have a past as a left-wing radical like Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong do. But it's such a good point on the councils that, you know, I don't understand this trend to collecting rubbish. They're doing it everywhere, fortnightly. Because, you know, it's completely unhygienic. For people who have babies and there's nappies, you need the rubbish probably collected twice a week, not once every 2 weeks, let me tell you. Steve Price.
Bit of self-interest there, Sharri. Bit of self-interest.
My council's still weekly, but it's happening everywhere. Steve Price, Bronwyn Bishop, thank you both so much. Now, we saw the shock news overnight that King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. Buckingham Palace released a statement confirming that the cancer was detected during his recent hospital procedure for an enlarged prostate. They say he commenced treatment today, but they didn't specify which type of cancer he's suffering from. For more, let's bring in now royal commentator Sarah Robinson in Westminster. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us this evening or morning your time. Look, what do we know about King Charles's condition and how serious it is?
It was an extraordinary announcement that we heard from Buckingham Palace early yesterday evening. They said that the King, as you've explained, had gone in for a benign prostate enlargement operation last month. He was discharged after 3 days, but during that time that he was in the London clinic where he's being treated, it turned out that there was an area of concern. Diagnostic tests has now resulted in that area of concern being that of cancer. We've been told it's not prostate cancer. It's not related to the operation that he'd gone in for. It is something separate, but the King is apparently in very good spirits. He's feeling very positive. His team have been feeling very positive, and I've been told that this has been a swift diagnosis and it's been caught early, but we're not speculating on what kind of cancer it is. It may be in the coming days that King Charles himself might decide to go public with the cancer that he has, but so far he's remaining closed mouth on that, and he's just letting the public know that he is undergoing treatment for cancer and will start treatment very soon.
Look, it seems unusual to make the decision to open up about the diagnosis but then keep secret the type of it, but also how serious it is. But we know it must be serious enough for Prince Harry to fly back to be by his father's side. What do we know about Prince Harry's visit?
OK, well, Prince Harry is on his way now. He set off from LA airport last night. He's currently in the air. He's due to land today in London, and I've been told that he's going straight to Buckingham Palace to see his father and be with him in the coming days as his father starts treatment for cancer. And I actually think it's lovely that Prince Harry has done the right thing. At a time like this, I'm sure everyone watching will have known someone or had someone in their family that's gone through cancer treatment. And the thing that you need at a time like this is your family around you. And it's taken this crisis for Prince Harry to come back, but it's wonderful that he's doing so, and he's going to be with his father to support him. And I can reveal as well that King Charles is a man who holds great faith. He's always had faith and hope that one day Prince Harry would come back and be with him, and they would have this reconciliation. And Charles's faith has proven correct in this instance, and Prince Harry's doing the right thing. He's understandably shocked. He's worried about his father, as the rest of the nation and the world is, and he wants to be there to give him that support, that son's support, which parents need. It's as parents are getting older and children get older, you know, these things do happen, don't they? This is when almost like it's the child becomes the parent in a way. So Charles will need now Harry and William, of course, in the days and weeks to come.
Yeah, and we'll keep covering this as it unfolds during the week. Sarah, really appreciate your time. Thank you. Now, coming up, a family's heartbreak over the stabbing death of a Queensland grandmother. Her husband of 50 years speaks out. Plus, one witness will join me to reveal how he told police that he heard protesters say, "Kill the Jews," but he never heard back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Well, 5 teenage boys have been arrested in relation to the brutal stabbing death of a 70-year-old grandmother at a car park in Ipswich. One of them, just 16, has been charged with her murder. Violene White's 6-year-old granddaughter had to watch her death, screaming as she was allegedly stabbed in her chest before the assailants stole her car. This all unfolded 6 o'clock on Saturday night in Ipswich, Queensland. Violene was about to celebrate her 50th wedding anniversary with her husband, who was increasingly dependent on her care after he went blind. Now he's a widow, all because of a senseless act of violence in an Australian town that should be safe. With his wife being killed, Victor White has said that he feels like he has been killed too. Yet, absurdly, Queensland Premier Stephen Miles seemed to laugh about this all during a question today from our Sky News colleague Adam Walters.
The absence of any reference to youth crime in your speech to the Queensland Media Club would have been noted by more than a few, including the people of those communities. Premier, I'm sure you concede the last 2 summers have been bookended.
Why would he laugh? I mean, this all comes as a Queensland court today blocked media from reporting any details about those alleged to have been involved in the death of Violene. They said a court filled with the media could be confronting to the accused child, the 16-year-old. Now let's return to the issue of the Gas the Jews chant at the Sydney Opera House. It's not the case that it wasn't said, there are eyewitnesses, but police didn't have the evidence required for criminal prosecution. Now, if ideological media outlets are twisting this disgraceful Opera House protest into a win for Palestinian activists, you have to wonder how they're twisting a wide variety of other stories, particularly on federal politics. These juvenile media outlets and fraudulent journalists push identity politics and then invalidate the experience of racism for Jews because it doesn't suit their agenda. But before you get too depressed, you only have to look at what some high-profile hosts like Peter Credlin, Erin Molan, Andrew Bolt, Liz Storer, James McPherson and many others have said on air.
This public celebration of October 7, the rape and murder of over 1,000 innocent people, was appalling, regardless of what was said. It was not a support Palestine protest. It was a party cheering the acts of terror which had occurred just 2 days prior.
I think I do hear "Where's the Jews," but I don't know if it makes it any better, does it?
Whatever the words were said, whether it's F the Jews, gas the Jews, where's the Jews, the hatred against the people who just had suffered a horrific terrorist attack, killing more than 1,000 people, it's open and shut.
And the chairman of News Corp and the executive chair and chief executive officer of Fox Corporation, Lachlan Murdoch, actually flew into the war zone in Israel last week to meet with our journalists who've been reporting on the conflict. He also went to kibbutz Kfar Aza in southern Israel to see firsthand the aftermath of the massacre. This is leadership that our own Prime Minister hasn't shown. Now, the Reverend Mark Leach, the rector of the Darling Street Anglican Church, was actually at the rally on the 9th of October at Town Hall, and he joins me now along with Australian Jewish Association President David Adler. Welcome, gentlemen. Great to see you.
Thank you, Sharri.
Now, Mark, let's start with you. You were interviewed by police. What did you actually tell them about what unfolded that night? And we know the rally started at Town Hall and then went on to the Opera House.
So thank you for having me here. I, on the 9th of October, went down to Town Hall because I thought this protest was going to be full of hate-filled chants. I knew what was going to be said, and I also knew the blood hadn't yet dried on the ground in southern Israel. The IDF was still chasing terrorists around southern Israel. So I went down, I thought, as an Australian citizen, as an Anglican clergyman, thought someone needs to shine a light on what's going to be said here. Someone needs to stand up and say, no, in the centre of our city, when the police warned me not to go down, they said, no, we're telling the Jews not to come into the city. And they said to me, no, Mark, we advise you not to come down because we can't guarantee your safety. I thought, that's not Australian. That's not on. I've got a right to be there. I've got a right to be heard. So I went down. I stood on the steps of the cathedral and I listened to them chant, and I listened to the crowd get riled up. And they did the usual chants, from the river to the sea, which of course is a call for ethnic cleansing of Israel. And then a group of them started chanting, kill the Jews, kill the Jews. At that point, I took out my Israeli flag. I thought, I can't let this stand. I waved the flag. And then, Sharri, I got chased out of the cathedral, off the Anglican cathedral steps where I was standing, by a group of these people, with one of them running behind me, threatening to slit my throat as they chased me up Bathurst Street and onto George Street. At that point, I hid behind a police van and the police dispersed the mob. But I heard them, genocidal cries, cries of kill the Jews. I then went and made a statement to the police after this, on the advice of a lawyer. He said that there's clearly criminal behaviour there, threatening you, threatening to kill you. I reported the fact that they'd said, kill the Jews. I've repeated it in public.
And that's clearly language that is an incitement to violence, kill the Jews, plus an actual threat to slit your throat.
Correct. And it was terrifying. So I ran, I hid. I've said it in every media interview I've done. The police came back to me, they investigated, I went in, made a statement, and they came back and said this didn't rise to the level of a criminal matter and they weren't going to proceed anymore with it, which I thought was a little peculiar.
More than peculiar. You know, I think this is incompetence that we're seeing from the police. David, you weren't there on the night. There was a witness who was there who took footage of the Gas the Jews chant, or what he and many others hear as Gas the Jews. The one individual that the police turned to for an opinion didn't hear that. Now, you distributed it on social media, or you posted it on social media, and it then went viral. This was October 9, the protest. You put it up, uploaded it on October 10. You never heard from police, even though it was clear that you first distributed it, and you had to chase the police up in late December.
This is an extraordinary aspect which has not yet been made public. We're making it public now for the first time. And that is that at no stage did New South Wales Police approach the Australian Jewish Association or me personally for the raw footage. And we heard that there was an investigation, and I thought for some time, what on earth are they investigating? And this went on for weeks. And so we thought, well, we are a law-abiding, responsible organisation. We will cooperate with the law enforcement authorities. And I had to do some work in order to find out how to get the raw video to the police.
Well, who was actually conducting the investigation
Exactly.
in the police force?
We had a contact in the Eastern Suburbs Command, and I approached him and I said, can you find out for me who is actually conducting the investigation and give me contact details and a name? And it took until the 18th of December for us to have a direct contact with a meeting with the New South Wales Police, and we gave them all the raw, unedited videos. So anyone who says that it was doctored, anyone who's been saying on social media that we didn't hand it over is spreading falsehoods.
Yeah. Mark, you know, you were there that night.
Yeah.
This is, as you say, the blood was barely dry. The fighting was still underway. You know, what do you think about the police and media organisations claiming some win for journalism because police couldn't prove that one particular anti-Semitic chant was said?
I think it's a terrible reflection of our divided society and the deep seeds of racism and anti-Semitism in segments of that society that have divided us. For me, it's extraordinary that we would celebrate some win that, all they said was, kill the Jews, F the Jews, where are the Jews? We know what happened when 3,000 jihadis invaded southern Israel looking for Jews. I know what it's like to have a bunch of that mob look for me on the streets of Sydney and threaten to kill me. I think it's just, it's a cliche, but I think it's deeply un-Australian and incredibly concerning that as a society we can't step back and have the moral clarity across the board from the Prime Minister down, policing, media, churches, mosques, to say this is appalling. It's just not who we are. Australia has a wonderful history of being a cohesive, inclusive society. And the only silver lining I can see out of October the 9th is that it has revealed the extent of this deep division and this ugly, racist seam of hatred. And we as Australians need to say no to that hatred.
Yeah. Look, we're out of time. Just very quickly, David, you also passed on to police a stat deck from another individual who was at the Upper House protest who did hear gas the Jews, and they never contacted that individual. Or they contacted him, but they never took his statement. They didn't interview him.
That's right. And this person is not Jewish. He's an ex-solicitor. He's someone who has had substantial experience with protest groups, and he has listed in his stat deck the chants that he heard, including gas the Jews.
I've read that today.
We're aware of about 5 such stat decks, as well as other witnesses who have not provided stat decks. And the really worrying thing is that we have seen, as Mark described, uncontrolled, ugly anti-Semitism, and there have been no consequences for the perpetrators. The fact that there is no consequences emboldens others to do more. So it's a bad situation.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, both, for your strength. You know, really appreciate you both, particularly you, Reverend, choosing to speak publicly about this. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure, and I'll just jump in quickly and say, out of this, we're inviting everybody to join us on Sunday, the 18th of February, 3 p.m. at the Domain, neveragainisnow.com.au. The Christian Church leading the way to unite Australians, Jews, Iranians, anyone who wants to come along. Come and stand against hatred. 3 p.m, February the 18th, neveragainisnow.com.au.
That is so wonderful. Thank you very much, Reverend. Thank you, David. Now, coming up, the RBA governor weighs in on the tax cut row and even makes a comment about the Taylor Swift wave of economic activity. Plus, should businesses be mandating office hours for workers? That controversial topic with our cost of living panel next. Welcome back. Well, let's bring in our cost of living panel. Joining me, the Chief Economic Advisor at Judo Bank, Warren Hogan, and the unconventional economist at Macro Business, Leith Van Onselen. Welcome to you both. Look, big day today, the first rate decision of the year. The RBA kept cash rates on hold at 4.35%, and Governor Michelle Bullock warned that inflation was still too high. She said the rate rises in the future could go either way. Everything was still on the table. Leith, what did you take from her press conference? Because this is Now part of the new regime, the new reforms implemented by the Treasurer, that we get to understand more about the RBA's thinking behind rate decisions.
Yeah, look, honestly, I think the decision played out pretty much as everyone expected. I mean, inflation's falling. That's pretty clear. The RBA noted that. They still noted that it's too high, so they're giving themselves some wiggle room. And the statement today was a little bit more dovish than the previous one, which means that it's a little bit less likely to raise rates. And I think it's taken the right approach. Basically, what the RBA said today was that they're going to wait for the data to see how it pans out. And if it continues to weaken, they potentially might cut. They didn't say that explicitly, but that's the implication. At the same time, if it ends up being firmer, well, then they could raise rates again. So they're pretty much sitting on the fence, which I think is the right approach and the sensible thing to do.
Warren, there are still areas of very high inflation, double digits, rents being one of them. What are the areas of concern?
Yeah, I think that's just the domestic service inflation that they're worried about. Most of the fall in inflation we've seen in the past year has been essentially global in nature. That is, it's all the stuff we import, goods price inflation. So that's great. We've got those prices coming down, but everything from insurance to rents to any other domestic service is still rising at a much higher rate than I'd like to see. And that's, of course, why they're giving themselves, as Leif said, some wiggle room. I don't think they'll necessarily have to raise rates again, but I think the message from today to all and sundry across the community is don't expect rate cuts anytime soon.
They're still expecting the target band of 2 to 3% by 2025, Leith, or do you think that's going to be pushed back to 2026?
Yeah, look, the RBA did lower their inflation forecast from the previous statement. So at the end of the year, they were saying it was going to be about 3.5. Now it's 3.2 at the end of the year. I honestly think that it's going to fall quicker than what people think. We've got, basically inflation falling across the globe, mostly driven by goods. But also the whole energy price inflation that we had, which has been one of the drivers, is now coming off as well. So I'm still tipping rate cuts in the second half of the year. Maybe we can catch up in 6 months' time or 12 months' time to see if I was right.
Well, let's hope you are, but don't worry if you're wrong. I'm not going to play your quotes back at you on the show like we would do to politicians. Warren, we are seeing that cost of living is still biting. We know that there's been a big issue in the construction industry when it comes to insolvency. Now we're seeing retail and hospitality also folding at a faster rate. So, how do you think these different economic factors are playing out?
I think this is a really important element of the economic landscape right now. We've seen the construction industry go through their problems. That's unique to the construction industry because of what happened in the pandemic with fixed price contracts. But we are actually quite vulnerable to a wave of insolvencies. And the reason is insolvency levels have been low, not just through the pandemic, but in the 5 years leading up to it. So there's a lot of what some economists call zombie firms. These are weak firms that, as interest rates go up, as the competitive conditions in the market tighten, they just don't survive. And I think this is, as you referred to now, broadening to hospitality, retail. It's actually happening across all industries. And this is one of the key downside risks to the economy, is if we see a real surge in insolvencies over the next 12 months, that's going to displace a lot of people from jobs. And although there is a lot of demand for labour out there, you don't just go from one job or one industry to another seamlessly. So I think this is something to watch very closely.
Yeah, I also think there is a bit of a contradiction. The media celebrating wins like today, and yet people are still doing it very tough at the minute. Now, just finally, some companies are starting to have mandates on office attendance, but there's warnings that this would lead to lower staff satisfaction. People now want the flexible working hours, this according to an analysis of around 500 firms. Leith, it's very difficult to navigate this new post-COVID climate when you want your workers to be satisfied, but a lot of bosses also want them to do some face time in the office, concerns around productivity.
Yeah, that's right. Look, it's really too early to tell whether or not the whole work from home phenomenon is detrimental to productivity. We probably won't know for a few more years once there's more data, there's more studies, that kind of thing. That being said, obviously, people got used to working from home over the pandemic. I'm biased on this issue. I've been working from home for 12 years. Absolutely love it. But the reality is, there's some bosses who are happy with it. So if you talk to the guys at say Atlassian, they think it's fantastic. But there is also another risk, Sharri. There is also the risk that if you decide to work from home, what's to stop an employer saying, okay, well, I'm just going to employ someone in Asia to do your job because there's really no difference. So there is a bit more of a risk of outsourcing if people decide to go this way.
Yeah, all right. Leith Van Onsen, Warren Hogan, thank you both so much. Now, after the break, the shocking decision by Premier to shut down an inquiry into how children are being allowed to change their gender. Stay tuned. Well, breaking news this afternoon, the South Australian Premier, Peter Malinauskas, killed off moves to hold the first ever parliamentary inquiry into the treatment of gender dysphoria. Federal Liberal Senator Alex Antic joins me now. Alex, this is an extraordinary decision by the Premier. Who was pushing for this inquiry and what were the politicians hoping would come out of it?
Yeah, well, Sharri, this is an inquiry being pushed by independent member of the Legislative Council, Frank Pangello, in South Australia. Deserves a lot of credit for doing it. We've seen similar inquiries pushed here in Canberra with Pauline Hanson, even myself through my own gender transition prohibition bill for minors. But in South Australia, this was hoped to be a nation-leading inquiry. There was a lot of hope that it would receive enough support. It certainly had support of many members of the Liberal opposition, Ben Hood, Nicholas Sidafati, Laura Curran, Heidi Drolmo, lots of really good people who were going to back it in. But unfortunately, this is the reality of Labor governments. It doesn't matter how sensible people appear, that they are always controlled by the hard left fringes of their party, and Labor and the Greens will never, ever support these inquiries.
Let's look at this other scandal. It's in the US, but it affects everyone around the world. There's reports that internal company emails have been released from Amazon, and it seems the Biden administration may have pressured Amazon to censor books related to COVID vaccines. This is in early 2021. They cited concerns that the material in the books contained propaganda and that old chestnut misinformation. Look, this is extraordinary. We knew the tech companies were censoring information, but we're meant to have freedom of speech in the West. And it makes you wonder, what else has Amazon censored?
Yeah, and others, Sharri. I mean, this should be more shocking than it is to people. But this is the reality of the world we live in now. We're seeing a brewing censorship industrial complex develop between big tech companies, social media companies, as you just said, but also now with some of the bigger corporates. And in congregation with the government agencies and the bureaucrats, we're seeing this frequently happening. You'll recall, of course, the Twitter files scandal in the US where the CIA were implicated in demanding that Twitter take things down and put them up. And, of course, here in Australia, we're not immune from it either. My Freedom of Information application last year showed the Department of Home Affairs were effectively the go-between between social media and a research company they were getting to spy on and report the posts of Australians during COVID. Some 4,000 posts were referred for removal, many of which turned out to be absolutely 100% correct. And that is the danger of what we're seeing with this this sort of misinformation, disinformation smear campaign. It is a censorship industrial complex. It is serious and it deserves further attention.
One of those posts that was censored was just criticising Dan Andrews and criticising masks. The censorship has been extreme. Alex Antic, thank you so much for joining us from Canberra. Now, thank you so much for your company tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And stay tuned. Right now, here's the great Paul Murray.